So recently I came across this website called reactpractice.dev, and they will give you a whole bunch of challenges to do in React to sharpen your skills. So I thought it'd make a great video for me just going through one of these and doing it as I would. If you're new here, hi, my name is Trey Wells. I'm a front-end developer and UI designer, and welcome to my channel. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. I'm gonna click on start here, and I'm gonna go to the very first challenge, which is called Build a Public Holidays app. All right, so the main screen should show a list of countries and also a list of holidays for a given country, right? And we can get this data through an API called the OpenHolidays API, which I'll look at in a second there. And they recommend using React Query and PaperCSS for styling. So we're gonna do all that, but first let's go ahead and go to our code editor. If you wanna follow along, I just have an empty folder called React Practice. And I'm gonna go to vite.dev. I'm gonna click on get started. I use Vite for all of my non-Next.js applications. It's a really nice bundler. It gives you a lot of like optimized stuff right out of the box, and it seems to be the industry standard these days. So I'm gonna copy this create command. I'm gonna paste this in the terminal. All right, and now it's gonna walk me through a whole bunch of settings for my project. So start with the name. Let's call this public holidays. I'm going to be using React, obviously, and for the variant, I'm going to select TypeScript. I highly recommend TypeScript being your default. It gives you a lot of nice type checking and makes your code a lot less error prone because it'll actually yell at you if you do not fix a potential error. Highly recommend it. It is the industry standard. I use it all the time in my day jobs. I cannot recommend it enough. This should be the standard for you, in my humble opinion. So I'm going to click TypeScript. It's going to scaffold out some boilerplate stuff. I'm going to CD into that public holidays. I'm going to go ahead and npm install the required packages. All right, beautiful. So now we have a React project inside of a folder called public holidays with a bunch of regular React stuff, right? I'm not gonna go through everything here. I'm gonna kind of assume that you at least know the minimum or the basics of React project, but just know that the app.tsx files, we're gonna have most of our logic, at least in the beginning. I'm probably gonna refactor this afterwards. And then we have our main.tsx file, which will actually mount that React application to a DOM element. That DOM element is in the index, it is this div with the ID of root. And this is where we can see here it's going to render this stuff inside of the document.get element by ID root. So, all right, beautiful. Now the challenge also said that we should be using React Query and PaperCSS for styling. So let's start with React Query. Let's go to Quick Start. And let's go to installation. And I'm going to go ahead and install this package using this command right here. I'm going to copy it. Let me minimize this just so I can get some more space here. I'm going to paste that into my terminal. I'm gonna let that do its thing. That was pretty quick that time. Beautiful. And then let's go ahead and go to PaperCSS. I'm gonna click on this. That actually links to an article, but the article has the docs as the first words in there. So I'm gonna click on that. And I'm just gonna use the CDN. If I scroll down here, we can see there's a CDN that actually links to the paper.min.css file that they have on their server. I'm gonna copy that and I'm going to put that in the index.html file in our project. So it's HTML. Right below the title, I'm going to paste that in there. And then while we're here, I'm also going to change the title, which is going to be the browser title, to React Practice and public holidays. Sorry for the typos. Let me go ahead and click save here. Also, while we're here, let's go ahead and delete what we're not going to use, right? So we're not going to use any CSS files. Let's delete both of these. Let's go to our main and let's delete this import because this no longer exists. We just deleted it. I'm gonna click that and click on save. And then in our app, I'm just gonna delete everything and give that a quick save. In VS Code, there's this extension which I highly recommend. It's called ES7 React Redux React Native. It gives you a whole bunch of handy snippets to speed up your workflow. And one of those snippets it gives you is called RAFCE, which is React Arrow Function Component Export. If you type that in and click enter, it'll actually scaffold out a empty React function arrow or React arrow function for you with an export default app on the bottom here. So beautiful. Let's go ahead and click save. I'm going to delete this React for now. You know, I'll probably bring that back in the future. Okay. I think with that, we're good. Let's go ahead and go to the React Query docs. And let's just go to Quick Start and let's just set up our query provider. So if you go to Quick Start, we're going to see here that we're actually wrapping our app or whatever our primary application component is in something called a query client provider, which comes from TanStack React Query. So I'm actually just going to copy this here and I'm going to wrap this around our app component here in our main.tsx file. So I'm going to hit enter and I'm going to paste that in. VS Code will automatically provide a closed version of that. So I'm going to allow that. I'm going to cut this out and I'm going to wrap this, wrap our app in this. I'm going to click save. Now we need to import this stuff because we didn't import it. So in VS Code, if you hover over something that's not imported, if you hold command and click the period button, it'll say add import from wherever the package may be. In this case, it is correct. It is TanStack React Query. So I'm going to hit enter there. We're also missing this query client, right? Which also comes from React Query. I'm going to copy that out of here. I'm also going to copy this comment too, because I think it's pretty helpful. Beautiful. Let me click save there. And this also needs to be imported from the package. So same thing, command dot, and then update import. And I think we are good to go on our main.tsx file with that. So I'm going to close that off. I'm going to close this extensions panel. I'm going to keep this open because we need to actually run the project. Let's do that. npm run dev. Let's see how we're looking. All right, pretty good. I think that's what we expect. Let me close off. Whoops, I closed the wrong thing off. Let me click on this again. Let me close off this and this. All right, so let's go to PaperCSS really quick here. So all I want is it's a few things. And I'm going to close this tab off. I want a wrapper to go around the entire app to make it look like the project. So I need the select menu. I may or may not use some of their list right now, their list items for now, but we'll see. I definitely need the container and then also the select. So let's go back to PaperCSS. Let's go to components. Let's go to forms. All right, so what we're looking for is this option right here, select with these options. And unfortunately, the only way to get that is to come find it in here. It is right here. I'm going to copy that out of the documentation. I'm going to paste that in this return function. For now, I'm just going to create a div, some type of div, hit tab. It'll autocomplete that for me. And right inside that, I'm going to paste in that code. And then in React, I'm assuming you know this, but you can't use class. You have to actually use class name. It might tell you, actually, if you hover over this, that doesn't do it. I'm typing name. Okay, it needs to be class name. And then for does not exist. It actually needs to be HTML4. Go ahead and click save. Now, I'm actually not sure if you're not in TypeScript, if it'll give you that hint or not, but it's just all the reason more to use TypeScript. It gives you those helpful hints like that. All right, so now let's go ahead and go up to our server URL, click that, and we can see that we have what we expect there. We also need to go back to the PaperCSS documentation. I'm gonna click layout, I'm gonna click on container. So what we need to do here is we need to have a div with a class of paper and then also a class of whatever container size we want. I actually want the small container, so I'm gonna give this first div here a class name of paper and also container-sm. I think that should give me what I want. Beautiful, there it is. I think I just need container and container sm. Container. Beautiful, there we go. That's what I want. All right, perfect. So now let's start talking about getting some data into our application, okay? So we're gonna need two APIs. One to fetch the list of countries that will populate this select menu. Then we also need an API to fetch the holidays for that given country in our dropdown, okay? So let's go to the API documentation here. Let me click on the test OpenHolidays API. So the two APIs that we're going to be using here is public holidays, return a list of public holidays for a given country, and also countries, return the list of all supported countries. So let's start with the easier one, which is going to be the countries. So if you open up this accordion and click on try it out, the documentation did say to use EN for the language ISO code. So when we come back to the documentation here and we see the language ISO code, right now it's DE. I'm not sure what DE is, but I do know we want EN. So let's go ahead and change that and then click on execute. And if you scroll down, it will give you a sample URL, the sample endpoint, which we're going to be using. I'm just going to copy to my clipboard. And then also it's going to give you a response body, right? So that gives you a 200, which is a successful request. And it sends back a list of countries. So Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, Brazil, all right? So pretty cool. So let's come back here. And just for now, I'm actually just going to paste that endpoint in a comment and comment that out for a second. So let's talk about our React query, all right? So let me go back to the documentation. I think I closed it off. Let me go to React query. Let me go to a quick start, which you're already on. So if we scroll down here, we can see kind of like a sample query, right? So they have const query equals this hook called use queries. And that hook takes an argument with two, or it takes an object with two arguments inside of it, right? So the query key, which is the way React Query keeps track of that specific endpoint. So it knows when to update it, when to actually revalidate it and all that good stuff. And then a query function, which is going to be a function, or sorry, it's going to be a function that returns the promise, which will either return a success or an error message. So let's go ahead and do that. So in here, let's just create our fetch functions up here. Let's do const, let's do fetch countries. This is going to be async. So whoops, async. My goodness, there. It's going to be an arrow function. And so what are we going to do here? Well, what we are going to do is we're going to do const response await fetch, and we are going to fetch this endpoint. Let me copy this. Let me actually delete that to create a little more space there. Let me create some more space here too. I'm going to paste that in there, and beautiful. Okay, so something to keep in mind about React Query is that the query function can actually be whatever fetch function you want, right? So I'm using the native browser fetch API, but this could very well be Axios or any other function that will actually fetch some data from an API and then return a promise. So just keep that in mind. All right. So one thing to keep in mind though about using the native browser API is that you need to actually handle the error handling on your own, because fetch does not automatically throw errors. I believe Axios does. So in our case, we want to do if the response. As a matter of fact, let's do this just to make sure. See what we got here. Let's close this out here. Just for now, I'm going to do react.use effect. Oops. Okay, I'm kind of assuming you have some basic React knowledge here. So I'm going to fire a function on mount, and I actually just want to do fetch countries. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. And let's save this. I got to import React. Import React from React. And then let's actually console log the response. Console.log response. Let's save. Go back to our app. Let's see here. Let's open up the dev tools. I'm just going to clear this off and I'm going to refresh. All right, so let's open this up. This is the response that we're getting from our API. So let's open this up. So we can see our status is 200, right? This is a successful fetch request. So what we want to do here is we want to check if response is not okay, then what do you want to do? Well, I'm going to keep it really simple here. I'm just going to throw a new error. So throw new error, error while fetching. Whoops, sorry about the typos. Fetching data. Okay. So what this means is that if the response is not okay, in other words, if this is true, it's going to throw a new error. All right. If that is not the case, if the response is okay, which I find hilarious, what are we going to do? Well, we want to return our response.json. Okay. We're which is interesting because normally we would actually do await response.json because this is actually a promise, but we actually want to return a promise from our fetch function based on the documentation from React Query, right? Very important. Okay, so with that, given that we're using TypeScript, let's go ahead and be better front-end developers and actually type the response to this. Right now, if you hover over this, it's not giving us anything. So let's go ahead and make this, let's type this thing. So we do know that the function that we're writing right now will return a promise, okay? So let's go ahead and type promise, and promise will take a type of promise that it's going to return. For now, I'm just going to do any, but we will end up changing that pretty soon. Is that what yelling at me? All right, so let's go ahead and delete this user effect now. We can. All I wanted to do for that, I just wanted to make sure that we knew what the response was. Okay. Let's see here. So let's go back to React Query again. And if we scroll down, let me actually go a little farther. I think it's if I go to queries and if we scroll down, what we're actually looking for is this right here. So if you notice how their React query, you can actually destructure is pending, is error, data, and error. We're actually going to be using that. So let's do const data is pending and is error. It's going to be equal to use. Sorry, let me get rid of, make some more space here. It's going to be equal to use query. And this takes an object. It takes a key, right? So it's going to be query, query key. And let's call this country list. And also going to take a query function, which we talked about earlier. This needs to be a function that returns a promise. And this is going to be fetch countries, just like that. Go ahead and click save. It's manual right now because I'm not using any of these right now. Okay, so that should be good. Let's try this out. Can I console.log data? Let me click save here. Go back to our application. We can already see. Let's clear this out. Let's go refresh just in case. We can see we are getting a response that has 36 countries in it. The ISO code also has the name, which is an array of language and text. So what we can do here is we can do type country types equals. So we expect to get ISO code, which looks like it's going to be a string. And then we have a name, which is going to be an array of objects. So let's go ahead and name. Let's say it's an object with text, which is going to be a string. Because all we need, we're actually not going to grab the language. And this needs to be an array of country types. So now we can actually fix our promise and do country types array. So now we know this is going to return a promise, which and that promise will actually resolve country types that are an array. Beautiful. Okay, so now what's next? Well, we need to loop over this data and output a correct select option for each one. And I'm going to do that by, first of all, let's change this select to select a country. Select a country. We can probably bring this down a bit. And let me go ahead and, what I normally do is I normally keep one as a reference. So I'm going to open up some JSX brackets. I'm going to do data. So one thing you can do, if you didn't know this, is you can actually alias variables that are destructured. So I'm just going to name data to country list. And matter of fact, I'm just going to change this to fetch country list. And this needs to be updated as here as well. So now instead of data, it's actually going to be called country list, which I find extremely helpful, especially because we're going to have multiple APIs in this application. So that's good. All right, so now we can do country list dot map because it's an array. Let's see, country, and we can open up a arrow function. And what do we want to return? Well, we want to return an option. So I'm going to bring this up here and click save, and that might work initially already. So now we're going to have 36 options, right? Because it's looping over that response from the API and creating an option for each one. But Obviously, we don't want option here, right? We actually want to change this to, let me delete this. This is going to be, whoops. This is going to be country dot name. It's going to be the first item in that array dot text, right? Because that is the way the data is structured. A name, it's an array, so it's going to be the first one in that array and the text property inside of that. Let me go ahead and click save, and that should change the option value there. Beautiful, look at that. All right, what's next? Well, the value, right? So this is an interesting one. Right now, all of the options value is just 1. What we actually want to do is, if we go back to our OpenHolidays API, if we go back to the fetch the public holidays for a given country, it actually needs to have the country code as one of the arguments for the API, right? It needs to be a parameter in the argument, or sorry, it needs to be a parameter in the API. So it actually needs that. The challenge also said for the current year, right? So it looks like the API also accepts a valid from option. Rusty's going to hard code this to the current year. So what I'm going to do is, so anyway, sorry, the point was that the value for each option needs to be the ISO code, which we're actually getting back in our data here. So if I go back to my project again, we can see ISO code AD, ISO code CH. So the value is going to be country.iso code, just like that. Now if I inspect the DOM, we can see the value is what we expect it to be. So we also need a way to keep track of the current country code, right? In other words, we need to keep track of the current selected country. And for that, I'm going to create a state variable. I mentioned that extension earlier. If you just type in the use and then capital S, there's this use state snippet. If I hit enter there, that will actually scaffold out a use state hook, which is perfect. The only thing it does not do, I tend to use React dot the hook name just to keep my import list short. But it does always use React. All right, it always leaves React off. So what this needs to be? This needs to be selected country and then set selected country. All right, and it did say to default to the Netherlands. I'm actually not sure what their country code is. Find it, Netherlands NL. So we can provide a default value to use state. That's going to be NL and click save. All right. Let's see here. We also need to give the select a value. That's the reason why it's not showing the Netherlands. Let's type in value here. It's going to be equal to the current or selected country. If I click save now, that should change, and beautiful, because the value of a select element is now that default value, which we have up here as NL, which is the Netherlands. All right, perfect. So, okay. So with that, what do we want to do? Well, I think what we should do is, let's handle is pending and is error first off, right? So how are we going to do this? So if it's pending, means it's still loading from React Query. We can see that here. So if it equals pending or is pending, they just output a loading text. I'm just going to do the exact same thing to keep it simple. So we want this above here. So we want to do if, let's do, so that's where we need to alias it again, because we're going to have multiple of these. So I'm going to say country list pending. And then let's go ahead and do some too. Country list error. Let's go ahead and save that. So now we want to do country list pending. So if that's true, then we're going to return, this is a paragraph tag. I'm going to say country list loading, or else we actually just want to output this form group, right? Because this is going to be the actual select menu. So if I refresh here, hopefully this will say country list loading really quickly. Let me refresh that. Here, I got a better idea. Let me actually throttle my network. Let's go to network. Let's go to, I'm already on 3G. Let's go to slow 4G maybe. Let me refresh this and see if we can see that a little clearly. Country list loading. There we go. So hopefully you saw that really quickly there. Let's go back to our network again. Let's just turn on no throttling. Yes, also how can I forget that? So because we're mapping over an item, mapping over an array in React, each child needs to have a key. So to make that, I believe ISO codes are unique, so I'm going to use that. So let's go ahead and give key. It's going to be equal to country.iso code. And that should get rid of that error that Yelling asked for. Let's refresh this. Okay. Let's see here. The other thing we need to do is whenever we select a new option inside the select menu, we need a function to actually set that new value, right? So we're getting this like warning over here. It might be an error that we provided a value prop, but there's no onChange handler, right? Like this needs to actually be a controlled input now because we're giving it a value. So I'm going to give an onChange, and that's going to be a function, receives an event, and we're going to do, and what we want to do, we actually want to set the selected current country to that new value, right? So set the country, it's going to be equal to event.target.value. So now if I click save, one, that error should go away, and two, it should actually work, right? Beautiful. Okay. All right. And then how about this? So if there's an error, let's just kill the app and return an error fetching the country data. So if country list error, if that's true, we want to return, let's see here, we want to return a paragraph tag that says error loading country list. I'm going to click save. Beautiful. All right, so now the interesting part, right? How do we get the data for the current country that is selected? So let me close, actually, I'll keep that open. Let me go to OpenHolidays. Let's go back to the public holidays. Let's click on try it out, and let's change this to EN. Let's execute. And just like last time, we're actually going to copy the request URL to serve as our template for our endpoint. And then we're going to do something very similar. I'm going to come up here. We're going to say const fetch holiday list. It's going to be equal to an async function again. And then we're going to do something extremely similar. Const response is equal to await. We're going to fetch this endpoint, but I'm just going to make this a template literal. So I'm going to do backticks here because I'm actually going to hard code the year. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to click save. What we can do here, we can actually do const year equals new date. And we want to do get full year. This will give us the current date. And so instead of from 2023, we're actually going to do money sign, curly brackets, and it's going to be year. And we're going to do the same thing for this year too. $sign, curly brackets, year. So that will hard code the current year as the valid to and valid from. And then the ISO code is still EN. We're just going to keep that there as well. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do if response is not okay. We're going to throw a new error, error loading holiday list, and click save. If that's not the case, in other words, if the response did come back okay, we want to return response.json. And keep in mind, response.json is a promise, all right? So we are returning a promise from this API. All right, we're gonna do the same thing for the return type here, but before we do that, let's actually take a look at the response in the browser before we define those types. So just for speed, I'm actually just gonna copy, make this a little bigger. I'm gonna copy this React query hook, and I'm just gonna make another one, right? Which that's actually kind of cool. You can do that in React query and it doesn't like mess anything up. It's really cool. So now instead of this is gonna be holiday list. Let's change this to holiday list. And this is going to be holiday list again. So the query for this one's interesting, right? Because it can't be country list, right? So in other words, React Query should not refetch this data when country list changes, right? Because they're irrelevant. What we actually want to change here is we want to make this our state value, right? Selected country, because whenever the selected country changes, in other words, if I go back to the React application, whenever this changes, we actually want to refetch some data or revalidate the data. So whenever this thing changes, the key will be updated, and that will trigger React Query to actually refetch the data again. So this needs to be fetch holiday list. Let me go ahead and change that and then click on save. All right, so what do you want to do for the holiday list, right? So first off, we should write something very similar to the country list, and we should kill the application and return those error if there's some problem. So holiday list error, whoops, holiday list error, go ahead and click save there. And we also need a pending state and then the actual data. So for that, what we want to do is below our form group, and actually outside of this initial check, let's go ahead and do our pending. So we want to do holiday list pending. If that is true, then we want to return loading holiday list. If it's not pending, what do we want to do? Well, we want to return a order list, and then we want to loop over that data and output a list item for each one. But for now, let me go ahead and just save this for now, and I want to console.log the holiday data that we're getting right here. It's a holiday list. Let's see what we're working with. Let me go ahead and click save, and then let me, am I still console.log in the other one? Okay, I'm not. Let's clear this. Let's clear this out and then refresh. All right, so we are saying it's undefined in the beginning because that data needs time to come back from the API. That's why we're saying that undefined in a bit. And also why we're seeing holiday list loading when we first get there, because it is pending, right? If I refresh this again, it's gonna be really quick when it says holiday list loading. Let's try it again. I'm going to network. Let's change this to 3G. Let's refresh it, see if we can get this. Loading. Look at that. So beautiful. And then when it's done loading, it pops back in. So let's go ahead and change this back to no throttling. Let's do a refresh again. All right. And let's go to our console. Let's open up responsive API. All right. So we're getting an ID. We're also getting this name array again. And we're getting a language, and we're getting the text, which is, I'm assuming, is the first holiday in the Netherlands. Let's go to the number. Let's go to number 9. Let's see. Name, Christmas Day. Beautiful. Look at that. So this is going to be the structure for our type that we expect from the API. So let's go ahead and create another one. Type holiday list. Types. It's going to equal an object. So what we actually want an ID for this because we need a unique value for the key, very similar to what we did for the country list. So I'm going to do ID, it's going to be string, and then the same thing, we're going to have a name array of objects. So name object, let's go ahead and put the array on here now just to make that array type. And then we're going to say text here, which is going to be a string. So very similar to the other country type types. All right, so now we can go ahead and add our return type, the same just like we did for the country list. Let's do promise, and promise takes a generic type, and this is going to be, no, not country, it's going to be holiday list types. Holiday list types array. Click save. Lovely. Okay, so now we kind of proved that our data is what we expect, right? So let me minimize this. Let me delete this console log here, actually. Let me click save. So now what do we want to do? Well, for each item in this array, we want to do, it's going to be holiday list dot map. So same thing, we're going to loop over or map over this array, and we're going to output a list item for each one. So I'll type holiday here. Let's see, we want to return li, which is going to be holiday dot name. Again, it's going to be that very first item in that array. So I'm going to type 0 here and then do text. Before we forget, let's give each one a key. This is going to be equal to holiday.id. So let's click save and look at that. Beautiful. Now we're getting a list of each one of these items as list item. This looks very close to the actual challenger, so that's perfect. Before I forget, let me go ahead, let me clear this console and refresh, make sure I'm not constantly logging anything. All right, so let's try a few. Netherlands, let's go to Mexico. All right, that looks right. Slovakia, that looks right. South Africa. Let's see here, Bulgaria. Actually, it's not changing. Is it changing? Labor Day, Labor Day. Let's see here. Germany. Interesting. So it's not actually changing. I wonder why it's not changing. Let me see here. Let me go to the network tab. Let's clear this off and refresh. Public holidays. Oh, you know what? You know what we're doing wrong here? I think I know what's going on. Each API call is just giving us the same country code over and over again. This actually needs to be dynamic based on the country that you want the actual holiday for, right? It makes a lot of sense. So we're just gonna put country here. Let's make this a string. And then instead of being DE all the time, we're just gonna change this to country. I'm gonna click save. And then for our query function, this actually needs to take that argument and do something with it, right? So we can actually make this an anonymous function here. And now we can pass this an argument. And what's it going to be? Well, it's going to be our selected country, right? Because this is going to be the one that we are keeping track of in state. So that's good. Okay. Let me refresh here. Okay. So let's change the Netherlands to Mexico again. Okay, that looks much more correct. Labor Day, Independence Day, Revolution, Christmas Day. Let's see here, Brazil. All right, beautiful. Now it's actually working, so that's perfect. That's pretty cool. Okay, so I think we have the main functionality done, right? But I think what's always a good practice to do is, being a front-end developer, I think it's important to try to like optimize your projects, right? So like, what can we do to make this thing better? Because right now, our app.tsx file is 105 lines long. It's all kind of condensed into one application. We can do better than that. So let's give that a shot. I'm gonna open this up, and inside of our SRC, I'm just gonna create a folder called API. And then I'm also going to create a file in there called fetch holiday list.ts, and I'm basically just going to copy this function right out of here, or cut it out of there and just paste that into there, and then I'm going to export that. Okay, so this will help us clean it up. We can actually just import this API as we would any other kind of component. The one thing that we are is yelling at me about is now this does not exist anymore in this file, but we're also going to create a types folder and put our types inside of that to keep it even more organized. So inside of SRC, I'm gonna create a new folder called types. And for that, I'm gonna put them both in the same file called types. So it's called types.ts. Let's go back to our app.jsx. Let's actually copy both of these out of here. And by copy, I mean cut. I'm gonna paste them in here, and I'm gonna export them both. Export type holiday list types. I'm also going to export type country types. Okay, so now we can do it. We can go to our API and we can actually just import this from its new location. So I'm going to click on here, command dot, and we can see the import from types. Perfect. Click save there. Let me come back here again, and we're going to do the same thing with country list. So inside of API, we're going to create a new file here called fetch country list.ts. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to cut this function out of there and move it to its new home. I'm going to paste that. And again, it's going to be mad at me because the country type does not live in this file anymore. So we got to import that. We're going to import that from our types. And then we cannot forget to export this new function from its new location. Okay. So right now, I think it's yelling at me because it's kind of hard to see, but like year does not exist here. So we forgot to put year in there. So I'm going to take this out of here as well. Oops, let me delete. And we can just pop year in there just like that. Perfect. All right. So lastly, of course, these functions no longer exist in this app. So we got to import them from their new locations. The same thing, command dot import from that location. Same thing here, import my location. Let me click save. Let me come back here and refresh and make sure everything is still working as we expect. It looks like it is beautiful, but now our application is just much more clean and organized. We don't have everything jammed into our app.tsx file. Let's take that one step further. Let's go ahead and create two components, one for the country list and then one for the holiday list. So I'm going to go to src. I'm going to create a folder called component. And let's start with the country list first, country list.tsx. I'm gonna do my same trick, RAFCE, right there, project component export. And then let's go ahead and copy everything. First, let's start with the API because these APIs should live in their own spot, right? So we need country list. Let's go ahead and cut this out of here. Click save here, country list. Let's paste that directly in this component here. It's gonna yell at me because this is not live in this file anymore. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to import that. And now I did that. I actually don't need this in this app because the country list component is going to come with everything it needs to function, right? And then the last thing we need to do is take the error out because the error also belongs in its component. And then we need this country list loading JSX to also get moved over because that is what actually renders that country list drop down. So now instead of returning country list, we are going to return that instead. Let me click save. Interesting. So we need to, so the country list, I think one thing we can do here to make this a little easier. So like we're always going to return a form group. And then we should move the pending inside of that, right? So let me show you what I mean by that. Let me go ahead and delete this, and I'm also going to delete this, and we're gonna move that is pending check to be inside of the form group. So the curly bracket, we do is what do we call it? Oh, we called it country list. So yeah, I'm just gonna delete these aliases now that they live on their own because now they can just be data is pending and is error. So let's change this to is error. And now we can just check for if is pending. If that is true, then we want to do what we did earlier and return a paragraph that says country list loading, or else we're going to output everything, all of this JSX here. So I'm going to go to bloat select. I'm going to paste that in. And because we're trying to return two different JSX elements as siblings, it's mad at us because we can only return one. So I'm going to move this label to be outside of the check there. Okay. So something pretty interesting here, right? Because so first, let's go ahead and import the hook we need. We need that use query hook, and we also need to actually use data instead of country list. So I'm going to type in data here instead. And this is so this select drop down needs to have a value in it, right? That value will come from app. We're still keeping track of the currently selected country in our app.tsx file. So let's go ahead and come to the top here and let's write some types for our country list component. So let's do type country list props, and it needs a selected country, which is going to be a string. Whoops. And this is also responsible for updating that selected country state value that we have on the app. So we're just going to do set selected country. And what's this type going to be? Well, this is going to be equal to react.dispatch. That takes a type. It's going to be react.setStateAction. Bear with me. And that is going to be a string. And let's close that type out. So this is going to dispatch a set state action to the parent component with a type of string, and string is going to be matched up with the selected country type here. So we're going to save that. And then let's go ahead and add those props in our component along with this type. So selected country, we can see destructure these from the props object. And then we can do set selected country, and this is going to be equal to country list props. And go ahead and click save, and that should work pretty well. Beautiful. Okay, so it's still not going to work because we're actually not passing those props in to our component. We're not using the component at all. So we do know we want the country list component to live here, and it expects two props, right? Selected country, which is going to be equal to the current selected country, and then also set selected country, that's going to be equal to, you guessed it, set selected country. Whoops, I typed that wrong. Set selected country. Let me go ahead and click save there. All right, so now we can see it works. It works the exact same way, but now our component is just now our logic is much more extracted, and now everything that the component list needs to do, it does on its own in isolation. So let's go ahead and do that exact same thing for the holiday list. Holiday is going to be much simpler. So components, new file, holiday list.tss. We're going to do the same thing, rect arrow project component export. Got to hit enter. Let's go ahead and do the same thing here. Let's copy this. Let's copy both of these into that new component. Holiday list. Let's go ahead and paste that in there. Let's go ahead and import all the required packages and import from there. So let's see here. So same thing, right? This is also going to need a prop passed in, which is going to be the current selected country, because this API needs to fetch data based on that variable, right? So what we're going to do here is something very similar to the last one, and we're going to create a type here. Let's call it holiday list props, and all this one needs is a selected country, which is going to be a string. Let's go ahead and use that. We do the same thing. We can destructure selected country from props, and then holiday list props, and then go ahead and click save here. I'm gonna do the same thing as the other one. I'm actually gonna delete these aliases, and I'm gonna have it as data is pending and is error. Now that they're on their own, we don't need to actually alias them. You can if you want to, but I just don't feel like it's necessary. So we're going to change this to is error. We're also going to import our function from its new location. And then let me delete this React import. And then last thing you have to do is just move the logic from the app component into the holiday list component. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to paste this stuff in there. And we've changed this from this to is pending. Let me go ahead and click save here. So something very similar here, right? We're trying to do some logic at the parent level. You need to actually wrap this in a React fragment tag in order for this to work. Let me go on down, let me paste this and then click save. Lastly, we changed the holiday list back to data. So now it's looking for data. And let me go ahead and click save there. Let me go back to the app. And then lastly, we need to actually just use that component, right? So that should be fairly straightforward. Holiday list. And if you remember, the holiday list does expect a prop, and that prop needs to be a selected country. So select the country, and that's going to be equal to, you probably guessed it, the current selected country. And I'm going to go ahead and click save, and that should work. So now if I change the Netherlands from the Netherlands to Monaco, okay, it looks good. Let's change that to Spain. Very good. Let's change that to Andorra. Look at that, beautiful. Now let's delete our unused imports. And I think that might be it. I think that's good. So we went from an initial version where all the logic was in the app.tsx file, and then we refactored that to be much more modular. Right now we have all of our logic separated out into its own folders and its own files. And this is much more organized compared to when we first started. Now, we didn't need to do that for an app this small, but I think it is worth getting the practice of organizing all your projects, no matter how small. So if you learned anything today, please do your boy a favor and like. If you like what you see, please subscribe to see more stuff like this. And thank you for your time. Appreciate it.